Welcome to another episode of the Writer's Game podcast, where we help you monetize your message and maximize your voice. I'm your host, Kyle King, CEO and founder of the Writer's Game and 7-time public author. And if you haven't heard, we have a new book. We have a new book that is currently on pre-launch, The Writer's Game, The Business Behind Your Story. So there's going to be a link under this video to check it out, get on the wait list, and get ready to be able to have your life changed by leveraging your story. But it's not about me. It's not about me today. It's about my brother, Blake Nathan. Oh, this man, I could introduce him literally for hours because he's an author, he's a father, he's a husband, but he is a successful executive director and founder of the nonprofit Educate Me, where he is changing lives, not just domestically, not just locally, but around the world. He's leveraged a story. He's leveraged $1 and a dream to be able to change the lives of so many people. Blake, how you doing, brother?
Man, I'm doing good, man. A pleasure and an honor.
My God, I'm so excited, man. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. I have so many questions, and I know the audience will benefit so much just from your wealth of knowledge. But before we get started, I know I introduced you. How would you introduce yourself, and how are you using your story to change the lives of people?
Man, I'll introduce myself first. Like you said, husband, father, entrepreneur. I call myself an edpreneur, right? Because most of my focus is in the educational space. Author, as you say, right? And sometimes I forget, like, man, I did write a book, right? At times, right? But I'm just an individual. I always introduce myself like this: an individual that truly is trying to create educational equity, right? And that looks different in different ways, but I really have a passion to make sure we service students in public school systems across our nation to ensure they have positive role models in their classrooms on a day-to-day basis. And so that's why I started my nonprofit. That's why I try to create other organizations, support other organizations creating their nonprofits and sustaining their nonprofits. So I feel like I'm a change agent, right? And, you want to be the change that you want to see in the world. And for me, I can't keep on sitting on the sidelines complaining about issues if I don't want to come up with solutions to help solve these problems that our kids are facing on a day-to-day basis. So that's how I introduce myself, man.
Nah, man, I love it. And, before we get into like where you are now, kind of go back, how did you get this spirit of being a change agent? Like, where does this come from?
Man, you know what? Like, I was just talking to my parents yesterday, literally yesterday, because, I have a nephew, right? And so we're talking to him, and then my parents are like, man, he reminds me so much of you. Like, and I'm like, what do you mean by that? It's like, I was a good kid, right? I wasn't in the streets. I feel like my parents set a good foundation in the household for me. And so I really think that's where it kind of came from. Like, I saw that my parents were, trying to raise this good young man, but also make sure you have some good morals and foundations that you stand upon. So where you're in different spaces and in different environments that may not be the right environment or right spaces, like, what standards we live on as a family, right? And I know you talked about that sometimes too, like you're changing the word from expectations to standards. Like, this is the standard that we live by as a family and a household. And so where you're in different classrooms, in different groups, hang with different friends, like, you reflect back onto those standards. And so for me was, I knew I had a great household, but some of my friends didn't, right? And some of my now growing up, like some of my colleagues, you're hearing their stories. And when you're a teacher in the classroom, you're hearing the stories of your students. And I'm like, man, like, I want to make sure I can give back to a population of individuals that didn't have the same upbringing as me, didn't have a 2-parent household, didn't have, positive role models in their childhood growing up. And so I think it was really sparked at a young age, because I knew that my 2-parent household was not, a common trend for a lot of Black families.
Of course.
And, that I was exposed to. And so I was like, okay, like, I have enough self-awareness, right? Self-reflection that I feel like, okay, how can I be the difference maker? Like, how can I be that change agent? Because my story is not everybody's story. And I had to realize that, especially in education, you see this is a common trend where you have single parent households or co-parenting households. And so how do you make sure you're making a huge impact in kids' lives and understanding those dynamics?
Definitely. Now, did you always want to be, we're going to get into your nonprofit, but, what did you want to do when you were in school? Did you always want to have a nonprofit and do this type of work?
No.
Most people don't,
Yeah. I didn't, man. You know what? I didn't, but I think I just have this, like, this heart to give back. And I didn't know what that looked like. Growing up, that made like if somebody asked you for $1, growing up in high school, like ask you $5, you may give them $5, right? Or somebody say, hey, Cal, like, can you volunteer to help out with this community? You may do it. And that's you giving back and giving up your time and your effort and your talent at times. But I didn't want to start a nonprofit. I went to school to be a pilot. I went to, my undergrad degree is in aviation flight. So I thought I was going to be flying, be a co-captain or captain of a major airline like Delta or American Airlines, flying across the world, flying Boeing 757s. And
now, do you have your pilot's license?
I didn't get my pilot's license. That's the only thing I didn't get.
Okay.
Because I went into like the more aviation. My senior year, I went to an aviation management role. So I really want to understand, like, outside of like being in the cockpit, like who's making the decision behind the closed doors. And I think that's when the business light bulb kind of went off too as well. But yeah, I didn't see myself starting a nonprofit because I wanted to fly planes. I got exposed to working in early childhood educations, classrooms. That was my call, my start to my calling in education. And then of course I started teaching in the middle school technology education. So I infused both education and technology together. So my passion for aviation, passion for kids. And then I got a great opportunity to teach technology on a day-to-day basis, project-based learning to middle school students. Okay. And I always had this entrepreneurship spirit, back when I was probably 8 years old, cutting neighbors' grass and passing out flyers, working with my parents, selling ties at the back of the trunk. So that entrepreneurship spirit was always in me from a young age. My granddad owned a convenience store in Memphis, Tennessee. So I'm seeing him do his thing. And so I knew I wanted to be in business, but I didn't think it was going to be a nonprofit space. Okay. And then I learned about like, well, a nonprofit is a business. It's just the profits don't go back to the CEO. It goes back into the nonprofit and you invest into those things. And I'm like, oh, you can still pay yourself as a CEO of a nonprofit. So, hey, let me try that out. So, and I wasn't money hungry. Like when I first started Educate Me in 2014, I wasn't thinking about how can I make millions of dollars and I can be a millionaire. It was more so, how can I make millions of dollars and invest it back in the community, right? And so I think for me, that was my thought process. And you sitting business meetings all the time where people are like trying to convert you to like, man, do an LLC, do a for-profit. And I always say nonprofit founders are wired differently. They don't think about, they want probably $1 million because the more money you have, the more impact you can create, but at the same time, they're not driven by, someone saying, let's sell your company, right? Let's go public or whatever the case may be. Like they're driven by like creating community change. And you have people that want to do nonprofit and for-profit, and that's perfectly fine. I always suggest people you have a nonprofit and a for-profit too as well now, because it's benefits of having both. And so, but that was my spark when I started teaching. I knew I wanted to create a nonprofit for sure.
There's so much that can be unpacked in this episode, but I know we only have 30 minutes. We only have 30 minutes because I want to be able to bring you back, and I want people to continue to be a part of this journey. So I want to ask you this. So you have this nonprofit, you have all of this experience in education. You wanted to be a pilot, but then you got exposed to the management side, then, over time, step-by-step business, and then all of these different things. Talk to us about what your nonprofit stands for and does today. What was the spark to then start the nonprofit?
Yeah. So our nonprofit today, we're called Educate Me Foundation. That's the name of our nonprofit. Our goal is to recruit and retain more teachers of color. And our goal is to diversify the national teaching population by doing that. And so as we know, right now, Black men represent 2% of our national teacher workforce. And on top of that, Black women represent 7%. And I think sometimes Black women, we kind of skip behind that single digit because we always focus on Black men. And it's understandable because of how our young boys are treated in school systems today. And that's definitely understandable why we need to increase our Black men education, but our Black women only represent 7%. So single digits as far as Black men and women in our public school system. But we look at the student population, which is like 50%. Over 51% identify students of color, right? So you think about in public education, you got 9% teacher workforce that are considered Black teachers, but over 51% is students of color. And that is a huge disproportion rate, right? And so we're like, we got to do something about that. And so what we did is we created this organization in 2014, set on the goal to expose young people to careers in education. And then also work on college students and help them identify like their top job opportunities in school systems across the nation. And then also working with career changes like myself, right? I didn't go to school to major in education. I had to call the service a little bit later in my life, but I couldn't stay in undergrad. I didn't want to stay in undergrad for multiple years to get an education major. An education degree. So I was like, you know what? There's some programs out there that are alternative certification programs that will help me get my teacher's license. And so we partner with those organizations too as well. Okay. But our biggest thing is we don't want to say we want to recruit just teachers. We call them educational advocates because our goal is that we believe you should start the foundation in the classroom, right? So you have that that teaching is firsthand experience of being a teacher in the classroom, working with students, etc. But also hopefully that you'll have the aspirations to go into a higher calling, which may be educational leadership, the nonprofit sector, ed policy, ed tech, sitting on school boards, sitting on charter authorization boards and committees, sitting on state entities, right? Because if you have that classroom experience first, then now when you are in these leadership roles, making the big time decisions, right, you're thinking about students first when you're making those decisions. And that's our biggest thing that we see now. A lot of times people are making decisions and not thinking about students first, right? How will this decision impact our students? Exactly. And so, yeah, that's what we do. And the other question you asked was what again?
More so like, how did you get that spark?
Yeah. Oh, so I share the story every time I'm talking to a funder, right? And some people's like, well, Blake, people don't want to hear about your story. And some people like, no, they want to hear about your story. Exactly. I just give it to them anyway, because I think it paints this picture, right? Like I shared with you earlier, I grew up in East Atlanta, Georgia, in Stone Mountain, Georgia, to be exact, in DeKalb County. I grew up in a all-black neighborhood, went to all-black school, K-12. I had black teachers, not that many male black teachers, but I had black teachers. Went to a HBCU, Tennessee State University in Nashville, had black professors. So when I moved to the Midwest, it was a culture shock, right? Like I was serving black and brown students, but my colleagues weren't black and brown. Not like how I was when I was in East Atlanta or in Tennessee at the HBCU. And so it was like this light bulb moment. Was like, I started asking my students, like, how many black teachers have you had, or black male teachers have you had in your, up to this point at 7th grade? And some of my students like, Mr. Nathan, you're my first. And unfortunately, I kept in contact with some of my students, like on Facebook and Instagram, and like, man, Mr. Nathan, you were my only black male teacher I ever had, through my K-12 experience. And as I talked about earlier in this interview, like 2%. So it's a 2% chance, basically. Like some teachers, you may see a black male teacher in your classroom. And I was like, wow, like this is mind blowing that students in Chicago, or, Atlanta or DC or Houston, St. Louis, they're not seeing a lot of black male teachers or black teachers in general. And so I went to a institute, the Harvard Leadership Institute, back in like 2015. And I sit in this room with all these top school leaders, superintendents, deputy superintendents, school leaders, building principals. And I was probably one of maybe 5 in the room. This is my second year teaching, going to my second year teaching to be exact too. And I'm like, man, we're one of the most prestigious universities across the nation, an institute that's bringing the top educators across this nation together. And it's still in this room, it's only like one of maybe 5 of me that look like me.
That's crazy.
That's the problem, right? And we're talking about, increasing student proficiency. We're talking about student engagement. We're talking about school to prison pipelines. We're talking about cultural competency, all these different things outside of teacher diversification.
Exactly.
And so I drew on my little notebook and I said, you know what, like, I want to create an organization. So I started thinking like about Thurgood Marshall, thinking about, Urban League, all these different, nonprofit organizations that are staples in the Black community. And I was like, I want to create something just like that. And so I created Educate Me in that room. I drew out my logo, I created the name, and I said, and Educate Me, the ME stands for Minorities Educating. It's, if you ever see our logo, it's red, it's blue and red. It's like from this calmness to like this sense of urgency. The ME is capitalized for a reason, because it's a cry for help. Like students, I've been on the front lines, I've been a teacher, and I know students truly have a desire to be educated. And they're in their classroom right now saying like, Cal, educate me. Like, exactly. I want to be educated. I want the resources. I want the support. I want the wraparound service. I want to be pushed. I want to be loved on. And for us, it's like, we are that answer to that cry for help. Like, we hear you and we want to educate you. And so, we set on this mission of like, what does that look like? So we looked at best practices. You know, I always look at other organizations a lot. It was an organization that started the same year as me, Profound Gentlemen. They do a phenomenal job with Black men as well. You look at, you know, the Black Teacher Collective and Collaborative, but you also look at organizations like Teach for America, Relay Graduate School, the TNTPs in the world, and like, what are they doing to get more Black individuals into the classroom? And so for us, our unique value proposition was we're going to target HBCUs. We're going to make sure we go to the biggest population and concentrated population of Black individuals. Historically Black college universities, they produce over 50% of our teacher workforce. And we're like, that's where we're going to start. But we're not just going to pop up a table at a career fair. We're not just going to come once a year to kind of collect resumes and say, hey, we want to support you. We're going to be intentional on these college campuses by creating like these collegiate ambassadors,
of course,
that are basically our own campus recruiters, because they understand the culture, the pulse, the climate of what's going on those college campuses. Even I went to HBCU. I graduated in 2012. That's at this point 11 years ago, right? Yeah. And it's like they know what's going on. They know the barriers that they're facing. They know the hurdles they need to overcome. We need to hear first from, again, students first. We need to hear from the students first to see what's going on and ensure student voice is brought to the table or where decisions are being made. And that was a whole purpose for us, for sure, creating an ambassador program. And so we're excited today to do a lot of wraparound services for teachers. We still partner with these other certification programs. We created our own teacher residency program because, again, it's a collaborative effort. We understand at the end of the day, we cannot do this work by ourselves. And we need people that are going to come to the front lines with us to ensure that there are students in our classrooms that are seeing positive male and female role models that look like them, right? Exactly. And that's what we're on a mission to do. And we've been doing it since 2014.
And you guys have, like, first, that is amazing. And I know all of this, but anybody who is watching this, I hope you see, one, the passion, the authority that he is in this space. He's an expert in this space. And, you know, just his love and just genuine spirit for being able to give people in these spaces opportunity and hope that there can be change in these neighborhoods and communities, as we're looking at, you know, education being the great equalizer to our society. So, but outside of all of the impact and difference that you've been able to make, you've really been able to create some great numbers as a
yeah.
And the title of this episode is how the story that generated $1.1 million in 1 year. I think your whole background and your whole nonprofit mission is based upon a story. So talk to us about how you've been able to leverage that story and leverage your passion and leverage all of the different things that you've talked about today to be able to have such success as a nonprofit founder, where majority of us, you know, in the nonprofit space don't achieve that success. Talk to us.
Man, you know what? It probably took me, you know, a few years, right? Because as a nonprofit founder, right, we have this vision, and it's usually a big vision. We want to boil the ocean. One of my good friends, Rob Hort, he runs a nonprofit called the Trap Garden, and he said, "Man, we can't boil the ocean." And I was like, "What do you mean by that?" It's like, you know, you can't boil the ocean. It's so much water, right? Like, how can you, that's almost impossible to like actually say, I'm going to make the ocean hot enough where I'm going to boil it. And it's just a kind of an unattainable goal at times. And so sometimes as nonprofit founders, you have your vision statement, right? You say, okay, this is the big goal that I want to achieve for my nonprofit organization. But then you have this mission statement, which are like the actionable steps you take to achieve that vision. And so for so many years, starting off as a young nonprofit founder, I was like, I had this big vision. I was only focused on the vision. I really wasn't focused on the mission statement of our organization. And so for us, when I was telling my story, I was casting this big vision to funders, right? This is what we want to do. We want to, again, you heard me earlier in the interview. We want to diversify the national teaching population. That is our big goal. Like, if it's at 9% now, probably in about 5 years, we want to get it to 20%. That is our big goal. A funder doesn't want to hear that, right? It sounds good. It sounds ambitious. And it sounds like, oh man, like you're a true visionary, Blake. But hey, let's talk about in 1 year, what do you want to do?
Mm,
What impact do you want to make in 1 year, in one city, one community, one state, with one group of people? Like, what do you want to do? And so
that's good.
this year, I was just really laser focused on like, forget everything else we were trying to do. Like, forget all the big things we're trying to do as far as a vision. Like, let's just focus on this like one thing that we're trying to like accomplish this year. And it wasn't recruitment. It was more so around like retention strategies for teachers, because as you know, like you've been in school systems too as well. You know, you can cast this big, vision to a aspiring teacher and roll the red carpet out for them. But when they get in that school building, it's up to the school to deliver, right? It's up to the school to retain that teacher. And so for us this year was like, we got to figure out some retention strategies. But we also been in the game enough where it's like, we know it works, we know what doesn't work, and we're like, okay, what does that look like? And so the Black Teacher Residency Program that we launched, that was a big investment from the Urban League, over $400,000 investment. We had another couple funders at $75,000, $100,000, because it wasn't just like, oh, we got this big goal. We told them like, this is what we want to do. We have the data to back it up. We know the need that is out there. And then we also, I talk about collaboration over competition.
Exactly.
For us was, we're not showing that we're competing with any organization in the city that we're in, or the state that we're in, or community that we're serving. We're going to partner with these organizations, right? And so I really leveraged like partnerships this year. Because again, when you're asking for big money from a funder, even if you're asking for $20,000, right? A funder wants to know like, hey, Cal, who else are you doing work with, right? Who else are you collaborating with? And also, if you're doing similar work to another organization in your backyard, a funder's not, they're smart, right? They're intelligent enough to do research. They're intelligent enough to say, you know what, Cal, I see you're doing something similar to this other organization. Have you heard of them? Have you talked to them? And so I was really intentional this year too, as well. This past year, like, I know these other organizations, I need to collaborate with them. And it wasn't ill intent. It was intentional. I was like, because they had some added value that they can be a service to me. And also I had some added value. I can be a service to them. And how can we attack this goal to get collectively in our individual lanes to come together to serve one purpose? And so I was truly intentional, like partnerships this year. I was truly intentional, like identifying the right funder, because at times too, we want to chase the dollar and raise all this capital for our organizations and our businesses. But sometimes it's not all money is good money, right? And I have learned that too through this journey, is that I haven't gotten 6-figure donors, and I was questioning myself like, this probably wasn't a good partnership, or this probably wasn't a good funding opportunity for us. And when you're laser focused and thinking about that one thing, or you have a strategic plan in place. I always tell any nonprofit, have a strategic plan, because that's your foundation. That's the game plan, quote unquote, for your nonprofit. And if you deviate from that game plan, of course, usually good things are not going to happen, right? Because you're like, hey, we're not sticking to the script or our core values for our organization, right? Is this aligned with our core values, our mission statement, our vision statement? So this year, I was laser focused on that. And then going into 2023, right, we're going to continue to build upon those programs that we was laser focused on last year. And so this year, our goal is $3.3 to $5 million to bring in revenue, because we know we now have a service that we can provide, a product that we can offer, that is, we create a blueprint for, and we talk about systems and operations, that we can pick this thing up and take it to another city and deliver a good program or good service to another community that needs it.
Man, that's absolutely amazing. I wish we had the button where you could like put the clap in.
Yeah.
No, that's absolutely amazing, man. And it's amazing because I've heard this story over, and I've been with you as a part of these last few years. Yeah. And so for people to hear this, I think I hope that whoever's listening right now, whether you're watching the live or the recording, I hope you're able to take notes and reach out to him. And either, if you're a funder, provide them with funding to continue this great mission. If you're in need or assistance of starting your nonprofit, reach out to him so that he can be able to help you, and his company can help you set up, establish, and be able to scale your nonprofit moving forward, because he's been at every stage and is continuing to grow. So for somebody that's watching right now that wants to start a nonprofit,
Mm-hmm.
where should they start, and what's like your best strategies or a 3 to 5 step process for them to get rolling?
Yeah. So I think where they should start is asking themselves first is why they plan on starting this nonprofit. And it could be for multiple reasons, right? And I say usually people are starting a nonprofit because they see a community need, they want to address it. They have a life story that's impacted them either positively or negatively. And they feel like they want to be the change or continue to offer something to a community that impacted their lives. So they have a story to share. Or 3 is like they accumulated a lot of money, wealth, and they feel like, man, you know what? It is my duty and my purpose in life to give back, right? And so you're probably one of those 3 people, right? You see a need, you want to address it, have a life story. You're a for-profit company or individual that's a high income earner, and you want to give back to your community in some type of way. And then from those 3 people, where you start is you think about, okay, I know the reason why I want to start this organization. I got that, right? The next step is who can help me service my community? Like, who are the people? I call them like your dream team or your starting 5. And my starting 5 is your board, right? You need to identify some board members that are going to help you carry out this vision. And I'll say your board is probably at the beginning stage is more important than your team, because you may be the solopreneur for the first, few months to a year until you bring in some capital. But your board is going to be instrumental to help you, one, get your tax exemption status, but also help you identify partners, identify funding sources, and also streamline your offer, right? Your programs, your services, your products you're going to sell. Exactly. And so once you identify why you start your nonprofit, you identify your board, I think the next step is like your mission, your vision, your core values, and the things that you're going to offer, your programs you're going to offer, right? That's the next thing, because your board will help you with that mission and vision statement too as well. But also you got to think about what you're going to offer. It's like, so if we see a need in the community, let's say it is food deserts, right? The thing that you can offer to that community is plenty of things. You can do a food bank. You can help teach people how to grow their own fresh foods and fruits and vegetables. You can create, stipend programs so people can be able to, with the inflation, like stipend programs. You can lobby for, tax credits for individuals. So it's plenty of things that we can look at how we can solve combating food deserts. So now as your nonprofit, you got to think about which of these 4 I'm going to do. Because again, going back to early in the interview, it's like, we got to be laser focused starting out. We can't boil the ocean. We can't do all 4 out the gate. We got to think about one thing we want to do first and see how we can have a proof of concept, right? Collect some data, show some success, collect some testimonies, right? Show impact. And that's what we kind of do first. And then the 4th one is like actually doing your filing, right? To get your tax exemption status. Because on the application, they're going to ask you, what does your organization do, right? Who are your board members? How'd you set your business up? Like, you got your business email address, phone number, website, etc. Who's the CEO, all those different things. But that's going to be done in the first few steps. And so the last step is actually doing your filing through your individual state to the Secretary of State. And then once you get your EIN, you'll file your 1023 application to get your tax exemption status.
That's you can literally tell that you do this.
Yeah.
It's interesting being on the other side, because when people ask me like, how do you write books? It's that simple.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody's going to need help with this. Do you have a program? Do you have something, resources out there that somebody that wants to be able to work on their nonprofit?
Yeah.
And they work with you? How do they go about doing that?
Yeah, so we have I have plenty of resources, and I think it's dependent on the learner you are, right? You may be individuals like, I'm interested in this nonprofit, right? I have an idea. I want to read a little bit more because my busy schedule. So I have an ebook right now. It's actually how to launch your nonprofit ebook. I'll have launch your tax exempt nonprofit ebook because I want you to get your tax exemption status. There's big benefits of that. I have how you launch a nonprofit ebook. I also have how to launch your tax exempt nonprofit course as well. So I'm a visual learner. I'm also an audio learner too as well. So I need to visually see some things. I need to actually hear the speaker talk to me. So when I'm reading my books on Audible, reading my books in general, I have a physical copy and I listen to Audible too. So that may be you watching this interview. Like I get you, Blake. So in my course, I also give you the ebook as well. So you can read through it.
Okay.
And then the ebook, I'm on the course, I actually have like different diagrams, charts, etc. When I'm talking through the audio, you can visually see what I'm going through as well. So you don't have to go back and forth from the ebook and the course. But I walk you step by step on from ideation to actually implementation, right? Doing your 1023 application, all in the course. But then you have these other individuals like, man, the course is good, and we, I read the book, but Blake, I'm still just not wrapping my head around. I need a thought partner. I need a strategic thinker that can sit with me and walk me through this process. And so I do offer coaching to help do your application as well, because one, I want you to teach you how to do it, but you may say, Blake, my schedule's too busy. So I have another offer too as well, where I can me and my team can do the application for you and get your tax exemption status to you. This is a great time of year right now before tax season comes up around the corner to get it in right now, right? And we could do it within 30 days. And so that's my other offer that we do. You may be a nonprofit watching this right now. I had a client yesterday where they got their tax exemption status revoked, right? And if you don't know what that means, is you can lose your tax exemption status, right? You can always have it if you file your taxes, but there's ways that you can lose it. And I had a client yesterday that they lost their tax exemption status because they didn't file their taxes in 3 years. And I see clients,
That's a problem.
Yeah, but I say that because some people don't know. Like, I see clients right now, they start their nonprofit. So it's the difference between starting your nonprofit and getting your tax exemption status. So let's say this is 2023 and you're watching this podcast and you're like, oh, I started my nonprofit in like 2021, but I never got my tax exemption status. So if we file your tax exemption status this year, the IRS is going to say they're going to retro date your exemption status back to 2021. So if you didn't file taxes because you didn't have your quote unquote exemption status for those first 2 years, you're already 2 years behind. And some nonprofit leaders don't know, like, oh, I didn't make any money, or I didn't bring any dollars, or, I didn't get my exemption status, I'm not going to file any taxes. No, you still need to file your taxes, still do a postcard, still file your taxes, even if it's zero. You want to be compliant with the IRS. And I'm sharing this from a firsthand perspective because this has happened to me. I have gotten my tax exemption status revoked. And so when I'm teaching clients, I'm not telling you something that has never happened to me. And it's because I learned the hard way. I didn't know my clock started back in 2014, even though I got my exemption status in 2015. And so I always tell nonprofit founders that too as well. So in my one-on-one coaching with clients, like, we're talking about that, how to make sure you're compliant. Make sure you're in compliance with the IRS as far as tax filing, compliant with IRS as far as being an nonprofit organization, because you are definitely, there's different rules and regulations being tax exempt versus non-tax exempt. And so we talk about that all through the process. But and then of course we do strategic planning with organizations now, do a lot of grant writing as well. And so there may be organizations that want to need grant writing services to increase their revenue for their nonprofit, strategic planning. But I always say you got to be grant ready as well. And so we do a grant readiness process with clients to ensure that they're grant ready, because we can find the dollars, but I'll be like, hey, Cal, like, what do you have already in place? Do you have a strategic plan? Do you know your programs? Do you know your budgets? All those different things that we talk with clients first to ensure they're ready to go. But I got my Instagram handle in here right now, at the Nonprofit Guy on Instagram, all social media channels, Facebook. My name, Blake Nathan's, on LinkedIn. You can go.
Where does somebody find out about your course and all of these different things that you said as well? Is there a link, or would it be best for you to or for someone to send through your Instagram?
Yeah, go to my Instagram, links in my bio. Because again, it's all my links are in my bio. At the Nonprofit Guy, also launchyournonprofit.org as well. And so you can get the ebook, you can get the course. I got consultations as well. Me and my team will talk with you through some strategies. And on there, you can select which services you need. But I would say 2023 should be the year that you definitely should start your nonprofit. If you have a for-profit company, start your nonprofit. Tax-exempt nonprofit. There's so many benefits from, of course, want to purchase properties, no property taxes, student loans, public service loan forgiveness programs. I mean, but the biggest thing is, like, you get a chance to give back, right? We do all these things during Thanksgiving, giving out free turkeys, Christmas, Boys for Tots, and back to school. Like, why not have your own nonprofit and know where the money's going, right? I mean, you know where the money's going. And it's super, I would say, like I said, it's easy to me because I've been doing it for so many years. But I don't want people to think if you've created LLC before, if you can definitely create a nonprofit, right?
Yeah,
And I'm here to help you out along the way.
Blake, this is phenomenal. This is phenomenal. And anybody listening right now, I want you to go start your nonprofit right now. I want you to set up your nonprofit properly if you're already a nonprofit owner. I want you to work with Blake to be able to get funding, to be able to get grant access so that we can be able to ultimately impact and empower our communities together. It takes all of us. It takes all of us, but you need to learn from an expert. You need to learn from somebody that is leveraging his story to be able to generate so much wealth in our communities, but also provide so much hope and opportunity for our educators that they can go off and empower our students within the classroom. Blake, if you had 30 seconds to share one message with the world, what would it be?
Oh man, one message with the world. We talked about I'm an author, right? And I had a book I wrote, oh my God, 2-3 years ago, right? It's actually behind me. I have it right in front of me. I can show the people. Cal's not the only author on the podcast. But no, I want to leave people with this. Like I entitled the book Just $1 in a Dream. And if not now, then when? Because I think people are watching this podcast right now thinking like, man, I don't have the financial resources to invest in myself. I may just have just $1, right? And the only thing I really have that God has given me is just a dream. But I want to ask yourself, if not now, then when? If not who? If not you, then who? And at the end of the day, there are people in their community that Cal says all the time that need to hear your story, that actually needs your nonprofit, because you are the beacon of hope for them, right? And if not now, then when would you do it? It would never be the right time, right? It would never be. Nothing would be the perfect situation for you to step out on faith and step out on yourself and bet on yourself to feel like, you know what, this is my time. I invested in my last dollars in plenty of things that I felt like was going to be a great ROI for me, a return on investment for Blake Nathan. And so if you're watching this podcast, like if you're not going to bet on yourself, who will? And I think anybody that will support your nonprofit, anybody will support your book, anybody will support your organization, your company, they're going to first ask you, how much sweat equity do you have in the game? Like how much have you invested? How many blood, sweat, and tears have you given into this endeavor? And so I want to tell people that, if not now, then when? We don't need to wait anymore. So it is a sense of urgency, right? The time is now that you need to make sure that you are trying to create your nonprofits, trying to write your books, and just invest in yourself. Because, at the end of the day, there are future generations of young people that are counting and betting on you to make sure you can be the beacon of hope for them.
Man, we can't close any better than that. Any better. Blake, I appreciate you, brother, so much, more than you even know. If you're watching this podcast, I want you to like it. If you're watching the recording or the live stream, I want you to like it. And I want you to share it with 5 people that you know. I want you to take time and go follow Blake Nathan on his different channels and take advantage of the different offers that he has available for you. If you are listening to this for the first time, we thank you. Comment below some of your questions, either for me or for Blake, and we'll be sure to get to those to the next time we bring him on. Look, this is the Writers Game podcast where we help you monetize your message and magnify your voice, and we'll see you guys next episode.